guy, and he's not going to hurt anybody. He treated his wife well, and he will treat Mama well.
Well, that's John Miller representing himself as a Trump spokesman in 1991, a voice that sure sounds like Donald Trump. The Washington Post, which obtained the audio, says it is the businessman posing as his own publicist. And it's time now for our Sunday group. Fox News senior political analyst Brit Hume, Amy Walter from the Cook Political Report, syndicated columnist George Will, and Bob Woodward from the aforementioned Washington Post. Well, Bob, you were quoted this week as saying that the Washington Post has 20 people working on every phase of Donald Trump's life.
That's correct. We've announced a month ago that we're doing a book, and we're going to do stories as this evolves. The equivalent effort will be made on Hillary Clinton. I mean, it's traditional, and I think particularly in this campaign, which is one of those pivot points in the history of the country, we need to tell people everything we can find out, and that means a massive effort.
Are you making an equal effort? Because that's something that we're hearing from folks, an equal effort on Hillary Clinton. You got 20 people on her?
Yeah, well, it's not necessarily the number of people, it's who's working on it.
So you got smarter people on Hillary.
No, but you know, believe me, you know, the goal here is the best obtainable version of the truth. You can't find out everything, and as we know, biography is character. So look at Hillary Clinton's time in the Senate. We should do a full excavation of it. Her time as Secretary of State. With Trump, every business deal. He said on his tax returns that there are 500 entities that he has. So lots of work needs to be done.
Brit, do you think that this kind of probing into Trump's life is legitimate? And what about complaints that you hear from a lot of conservatives that this is the mainstream media trying to sink Trump and help elect, and we heard this to a certain degree from Newt Gingrich just now, and help Clinton?
I think it's legitimate. And in the case of Trump, because
the probing is legitimate.
Yeah, I think it's utterly legitimate. And I think, you know, when you think of Trump, who, you know, for all of his celebrity, is nonetheless a newcomer to politics, whose, you know, the fullness of whose record has really not been fully explored. And I think that's worthwhile. And I hope and trust that a similar effort will be made with Secretary Clinton. I cannot, the record on this, however, is not so good. The media have shown, mainstream media have shown precious little interest in stories like the Benghazi story. And while it was the New York Times, I guess, that broke the story about the Clinton Foundation and its multitude of dealings, some of them quite controversial, the thread there seems to have largely been lost. So perhaps the slack will be taken up on that. A guy can hope, right?
How would you respond to that?
I mean, it will be done. It's done, and you know, you can't do these things in an afternoon or a week. You have to find people who are knowledgeable, ideally people who have not talked before, ideally people who have records and notes, and that's possible. And you know, the commitment is there. Jeff Bezos, the owner of the Washington Post, said to the editor of the Washington Post, Marty Barron, you will have the resources to do this on both candidates, final nominees. Must be aggressive, fair, and bipartisan.
Not surprisingly, Trump fired back at today's New York Times story about his treatment of women over the years. Here is Trump's tweet. Why doesn't the failing New York Times write the real story on the Clintons and women? The media is totally, all caps, dishonest. Amy, do you think that this adds to the problems that Trump already has with women voters?
I don't know. I don't think it helps him. But when I sit and I talk with women voters, I just sat in a couple focus groups this other past week in Pennsylvania. The women there not happy with many of his past statements and about women. But what they were the most concerned about was the issue of his overall judgment, where I heard woman after woman saying, I worry that he's going to get us in trouble, meaning with the rest of the world. One woman said, you know, we know what an eye for an eye, how that works, and it usually doesn't work out very well. So I think the concern for many of these women is not what his past was, but what he's going to do when he's president of the United States. And I think that that's what you're going to hear much more about from whether it's the Clinton campaign or Democrats focusing on what is it going to mean if he is commander-in-chief and the president of the United States.
And I'm curious, were they asked about the Clintons?
About you
the
mean in the focus group,
Yeah.
what they thought about it? Look, I think the perceptions of Hillary Clinton, let's be really clear, these women, even though some of them were swing women voters, some of them were Democrats, they're not in love with Hillary Clinton. Right now, their vote for Hillary Clinton is much more a vote against Donald Trump than it is a support of her.
George, the other big Trump story, and I thought what we were going to be talking about this week, was the fact that he came here to Washington to meet with Republican leaders, including House Speaker Paul Ryan. Here was Speaker Ryan after their meeting.
I was very encouraged with what I heard from Donald Trump today. I do believe that we are now planting the seeds to get ourselves unified.
How do you think Trump's charm offensive is going? And in the end, do Ryan and other Republican leaders have any choice but to at least make a show of being unified with Trump?
Well, a lot of Republicans are engaging in semantic somersaults, making distinctions without a difference at this point, saying, I support Trump, but I don't endorse Trump. I'm not sure what the voters should take away from that. There are a few different ones. Senator Heller of Nevada I've seen quoted as saying, I vehemently oppose our nominee. But you're right, the interesting thing is the mating dance between Donald Trump and Paul Ryan. In a statement issued after their meeting, but I'll bet dollars to donuts written before the meeting, they referred to our few differences. They spoke of our many important areas of common ground and urged the Republicans to unite around our shared principles, to which one response is name one. No one shared principle. For example, Paul Ryan feels very strongly about restoring the Article I powers of Congress and reining in on the executive overreach of the current president. Trump says if Ford moves a plant to Florida, to Mexico, he personally will stop it. And he says Carrier is going to bring back those jobs to Indiana. He, as president, will make it happen. No idea what inherent or explicit presidential power permits that sort of thing.
Let me just interrupt to say that I talked to a source close to Paul Ryan this week who said that Trump reassured, and this was a big issue in the meeting, that Trump reassured Ryan that he understood the separation of powers and the limits on executive authority. You can question, and I can see it in your face, whether he would do that as president, but he did reassure him on that very issue.
If he understands the separation of powers, then he understands that what he has been promising at rally after rally after rally can't be done.
What do you think of the story that we see today? And we've been hearing about this for some time, that there are a number, it's a small number, but a number of conservatives who just can't stomach Trump, our colleague Bill Kristol, Mitt Romney, and that they're going around to a variety of different people basically saying, even if you can't run in all 50 states, let's put you on the ballot in a few states, basically to stop Trump.
Well, you can't beat something with nothing, and so far they've gone down a predictable list of people, all of whom have said no. So horses for courses, and they need a horse.
and briefly, go ahead, Amy.
Well, what I'm looking at is not so much who's lining up behind Donald Trump in terms of big names, members of Congress, et cetera. I'm looking at one number, and that's the percentage of Republican voters right now who say they will support Donald Trump. The last NBC Wall Street Journal poll, it was 72%. Hillary Clinton's at 87% of Democrats supporting her. If that 72% starts to get to 90, then it really doesn't matter which big names say they're with him or without him. If the voters start to move, then it doesn't matter whether the Washington folks are with him or not.
All right, panel, we have to take a break here.